Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. This week, a legacy of Affrilachian poet Norman Jordan, a summer camp for teens to study their heritage.
Learning about Black history and stuff like that did amazing things. It made me realize how great our culture is.
During the Great Depression, Osage, West Virginia was a raucous river town. It's sleepier now, but music is keeping the magic alive.
What you see now in Osage, it's not the same as what it was, but this end of town is sparking up a lot of energy for those who want to be part of it.
And the author of an upcoming graphic novel about pipeline fighters has a message for people outside the region.
People in Appalachia are really on the front line of the climate crisis, and that if we leave certain communities behind, we will lose.
You'll hear these stories and more this week inside Appalachia. Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. Affrilachian poet and playwright Norman Jordan is one of the most published poets in the region. He was born in 1938 and died in 2015, and he's anthologized in at least 42 books of poetry. In the 1960s and 70s, Jordan was a prominent voice in the Black arts movement. Besides his writing, he left another legacy, a summer camp for teens to learn music, theater, and dance. Last summer, Folkways reporter Tracy Phillips visited the Norman Jordan African American Arts and Heritage Academy in Westover, West Virginia, and has this story.
It's a Monday morning in July on the campus of West Virginia State University, but it's not an average Monday morning. It's day one of summer camp.
Y'all ready for this week? Word. Me too.
There's a buzz of excitement in the air. Returning campers exchange hugs and hellos. New students make nervous introductions, and orientation commences.
Welcome to the 30th Norman Jordan African American Arts and Heritage Academy. We've been doing this for 30 years.
That's Brucilla Jordan, the wife of the late Norman Jordan. Norman was a poet and prominent leader in the Black arts movement, both in West Virginia and nationwide. In 1994, he and a group of artists started this academy. When Norman passed away in 2015, Brucilla took on the role as camp director.
We have a wonderful week of activities planned for you all.
During the week-long program, campers focus on a specific artistic genre, like dance, creative writing, or theater. But it isn't just an arts camp. It's about heritage and identity.
We always start our program with a libation ceremony. And a libation ceremony is an ancient African ceremony.
Students look on, attentive and wide-eyed, as Brucilla performs the libation ceremony, pouring water into a glass jar in memory of the ancestors. She tells them to say something they are thankful for. Then everyone else will say Ashe, which means let it be.
I'm going to begin by mentioning my mother. Her name is Sarah Wiggins.
I would like to mention my grandmother, Margaret Birch.
The orientation and libation ceremony kicks off a full week of classes and activities. This year, there are about 30 students, many of whom are returning campers, like Soraya Nichols. She's a freshman in high school who's been coming to the camp for 3 years now.
At first, I was really anxious to see if all my other friends were back and stuff like that. But now I'm just really excited and happy to see everybody.
Soraya's focus this week is on singing.
Miss Ely, our singing coach, she comes up with really amazing songs and makes them sound really good with all our voices together.
Like the song To Be Young, Gifted, and Black by Nina Simone, which is the inspiration for this year's theme.
You know anything about Nina Simone? What do you know about Nina Simone? Find out. That's your homework for tomorrow. Find out something about Nina Simone. Just one fact. Just one fact. Everybody a different fact.
Learning about prominent Black artists is a key aspect to the camp's curriculum.
Learning about these black people and black history and stuff like that did amazing things. It like made me realize how great our culture is, and it made me feel so much prouder to be black.
Brucilla says that's one of the main goals of camp, to foster a sense of cultural identity and self-expression.
You know, we do the camp on a teenage level because we know teenagers often they have not discovered their own talents. I believe when they identify that aspect of themselves and also the African American cultural heritage, it always gives them greater self-identity and interact, I think, in the world better.
Brucilla has witnessed that process of self-discovery firsthand.
My children attended the camp as campers, and they are all artistic. They are songwriters, musicians, organizers.
Brucilla's sons are now instructors at the camp, carrying on their father's legacy. And over the years, other families have become involved with the camp too. It's common for parents and grandparents to help out in different ways. In fact, Soraya's own father is here this week. He's a guest instructor for poetry.
We have a special guest with us today, Jimmy the Poet from the west side of Charleston, so please give him a warm welcome.
Soraya's dad, James Nichols, goes by Jimmy the Poet. Although Jimmy didn't know the Jordans before this camp, he's been inspired by Norman Jordan and his legacy.
I just think that his vision is becoming more full circle, not just for his family, his kids, but just for people like my kids and myself. So I'm very honored to be at something like this.
Today, Jimmy is leading campers through a writing exercise that he calls the forgiveness practice.
Poetry has always been an outlet for me. Freestyling has always been an outlet for me. And I thank God that I have it. So as we go through the forgiveness practice, I want you to really think about the things that you've gone through. And I want you to come up here and give me a victory speech.
The students write about a difficult situation they've had to overcome, and at the end of the class, they have the option to share their victory speech.
I get that we're poor, but can't you see so much more? I'm rich with ideas underneath my shell, but trust that I love you and I forgive you, and I'll still reach my potential as well.
Let's go.
Jimmy is passionate about sharing this experience with his daughter, Soraya.
It was important for her to come to this academy because I understand how important the arts are. I understand how important the freedom of expression is, the First Amendment is. Now that I think about it, her being in that workshop, if there's anything that I want her to understand, it would be two things. There's power in the gifting, and there's power in vulnerability.
Soraya says after 3 years of coming to camp, she's seen the impact camp has made on her life.
It's shown me a lot more social skills, helped me make new friends and family, and it's expanded my vocals, and it's changed my life.
After a full week of classes and rehearsing, it's time for the closing ceremony. Campers present slideshows of their drawings and paintings. There's theater, dance, instrumental music, and Soraya is performing with her vocal group. For the final send-off, the entire group joins together on stage where they stand hand in hand.
In closing, now let the circle all say, Harambe to all our people.
Harambe to all our people.
Hands go up. Know that we are all winners. Say that. Safe travels, everybody.
For this year, camp is over, but Soraya and other students are already planning to come back next year. For Inside Appalachia, I'm Tracy Phillips in Institute, West Virginia.
Just across the Monongahela River from Morgantown, West Virginia, is a small, unincorporated community called Osage. Years ago, it was a bustling industrial town with a thriving nightlife. Today, Osage isn't quite so bustling, but the love of music endures among its residents. Residents like musician Aristotle Jones. Last year, Folkways reporter Clara Hazlett brought us this story.
Nothing from a journey now. I got to make it into heaven somehow. Go to the devil, tempt me and try.
That's musician Aristotle Jones, singing along with his granddad, Robert Jones. Aristotle is on guitar, wearing a dark blue bowler hat. His granddad is beside him, in a newsboy cap and a red sweater, closing his eyes as he sings. This recording is from a video Aristotle made before his granddad died in 2019. They made a lot of these videos together. Robert Jones was a coal miner and a traveling gospel singer.
He would travel with his band throughout northern West Virginia to the segregated parts of the coal camps. I lived with him 3 years before he passed away, and he would teach me all these amazing gospel songs that he used to sing. Basically just started teaching me his catalog.
Aristotle was raised in Huntington, West Virginia, but he would spend summers here visiting his grandparents.
Playing in the creek and hiking and fishing and porch picking.
And listening to stories about a little town called Osage.
This was the old company store. And this is where the bunny hop was. We get to hang out in the middle of history here.
In the early 1900s, dozens of coal mines sprung up along a tributary to the Monongahela River called Scott's Run. First came the jobs, then came the workers. Soon, there were 13 communities along Scott's Run. One of these towns was Osage. It was the hub.
You know, the train come down through all day long, buses every 15 minutes, restaurants, grocery stores.
That's Al Anderson. He was born in Osage in 1937. He's a singer and shoe repairman, known as the unofficial mayor of Osage.
Bunny Hop was the dance hall. Everybody came to the Bunny Hop.
Saturday night in Osage, and everybody's feeling fine.
In its heyday, before the Great Depression, there were around 5,000 people living along Scott's Run. And they came from all over. There were Ukrainians, Lithuanians, Mexicans, African Americans, and in popular memory, these groups got along. It's part of the history that many residents take pride in.
Everybody looked out for each other in this little town, black and white. We had 2 schools up there, but we didn't need 2 schools. When the bell rings, you know, we're all back together. But when you get out of Osage, you know, then everything was different, you know. Everything's segregated.
Aristotle says music played an important role in building community that transcended cultural differences.
What you get out of that particular time frame was the traditions of sharing music and making music and building community around that. Your blending of raw ethnic music coming from the different populations. Then you also had folks like Al Anderson who played like rock and soul and rock and blues.
Although there was a strong sense of community among the towns of Scott's Run, life here wasn't easy. Since the economy was directly tied to the coal industry, it was boom and bust, up and down, pretty much from the get-go. There were strikes and mine closures, and then the Great Depression. In the 1930s, Scott's Run attracted national attention. It became a poster child of poverty in the Appalachian coal fields. In response, a New Deal program relocated some Scott's Run families to Arthurdale, a planned community where families would get new homes, plots of land, and government-sponsored job opportunities. But only white, American-born families were eligible for relocation.
See, they didn't take blacks or foreigners, and I think that's part of where the stigma started, see.
Al says people from the surrounding area looked down on the communities of Scott's Run, and Osage in particular. Here's Aristotle.
So it was like literally the other side of the tracks, and so a lot of folks from Morgantown would come over here to have fun in the bars and have fun with the music, but it wasn't viewed as something that was highbrow across the river.
As the mining industry declined, people moved away to find work elsewhere. And then in the 1970s, another federal initiative shook the community once again. A major interstate, I-79, was built right through Scott's Run, forcibly displacing many of the remaining residents, including Al's family and Aristotle's grandparents. It was part of a nationwide phenomenon where highway planners would plan routes right through Black communities. Since the construction of the interstate, Osage has been nearly swallowed up by development.
Up there is I-79, and it crosses straight this way. You're going to end up on the at Target and Walmart. That way, that's where you end up at Triple S Harley Davidson, like the Green Turtle, Hobby Lobby.
Today, the downtown has a familiar look to it. The look of a town marked by the boom and bust of industry. Boarded up windows, empty lots, a highway, roaring not through it, but around it. And while most folks have moved away, Aristotle has found his way back.
Living with my granddad really touched me because he was older, so he was telling these stories, and it made me kind of fall in love.
So after his granddad passed away, Aristotle decided to stick around.
What you see now in Osage, it's not the same as what it was, but this end of town is sparking up a lot of energy for those who want to be part of it, and I think it's those that are seeking out community that sees a future for Osage.
Down at the end of the road in Osage, there is this little shoe repair shop.
Aristotle refers to himself as the Appalachian Soul Man. His latest album is called Mountain Dew Wop in the Streets of Osage.
People like my granddad that passed away, they're the only ones that know. And so I was like, man, we got to tell this story. And that's a responsibility that I figured I don't mind taking up because it's my story too.
And Aristotle's not the only one making music here. In 2009, a musician from Trinidad brought a new tradition to Osage, the steel drum. Years later, students of all ages are still coming to Osage to learn the instrument. And just last year, Aristotle started a community choir with Al.
Now let us have a little talk with Jesus. Let us tell us all about our trouble. He will hear our faith.
Members of the choir come from all over. There's a few that grew up in Osage, but many are transplants to West Virginia. At this particular choir meeting, it's a group of about 15 people, young and old, black and white. There are even 2 people wearing onesies, a shark and a duck.
We did say all welcome, right?
That's right, all species.
At the front of the group is Aristotle on guitar. Al Anderson's in the front row, leading the call and response.
Yes, all right, 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 all right. Have a little talk with Jesus makes it
I do feel the sense of community blossoming. Me, I get to pay a little bit of tribute to the lessons I learned from my granddad and passing that tradition that meant a lot to me to other people.
Near the end of the choir meeting, Aristotle leads the group in one of his songs.
Our roots run deep and we stand tall. We are West Virginia.
I'd searched a long time for a way to call West Virginia home. So, when I moved here, that gave me an opportunity to not only feel at home in my own skin, but to feel at home in my own state, in my own skin. Osage has been a place where folks could come from all over and find that community to start to build their own West Virginia story.
It's been over 100 years of ups and downs, booms and busts. But Osage is still that place. A place where old songs are still sung and new folks are always welcomed. For Inside Appalachia, I'm Clara Hazlett.
Oh, in the town of Osage, I'm gonna let it shine. Yes, in the town of Osage, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, in the town of Osage, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
That story and the one before it are part of our Folkways reporting project, which covers arts and culture in our region. You can find more Folkways stories about step dancing, chair caning, and more. They're on our website, wvpublic.org. Coming up, a graphic novel showcases stories from the long fight against the Mountain Valley Pipeline. You're Inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, educating the people of our region and beyond for more than 150 years. More information at concord.edu.
Natural gas started flowing through the Mountain Valley Pipeline last June. The 303-mile pipeline from West Virginia to Virginia was announced in 2014, and it took 10 years to complete. Landowners and environmental groups protested and sued. Denali Sai Nalamalapu was part of the effort to stop the Mountain Valley Pipeline. Now they have a new book called Holler, a graphic memoir of rural resistance. It's written and drawn in comics form and profiles 6 activists who fought the pipeline. I invited Nalamalapu to join the show.
I'm a climate organizer and comic artist based out of Southwest Virginia. I grew up in southern Maine and southern India and then came here a couple years ago and have been working in the fight to stop the Mountain Valley Pipeline.
Which came first for you? Was it the mountains or was it the pipeline fight?
I guess it's a bit of a mix because I lived in Shenandoah Valley first before the pipeline fight. I would spend every morning living there, walking in the pastures around my partner's mother's house. And I fell in love with the light over the mountains, just the way it changed. And I fell in love with the way the sun rose and set over the mountains. And then I started working to stop the pipeline through a grassroots organization that's been leading the fight. And that sort of brought me to this specific part of southwestern Virginia.
You know, as someone who's covered the pipeline battle, I'm struck by Holler and that it's a visual medium. Because I think that pipeline fight, people read about it, but it was largely out of the public eye. And you didn't necessarily see a whole lot of photos about it. For a lot of people, that was something that was in black and white and text. And your book visualizes it. What made you want to go the comics route for this particular story you're telling?
Yeah, that exact point is really important to me as a climate communicator and a comics artist. The reality that climate change is often in black and white text. It's often something we read about or we're shying away from photos of it. Like the photos of Hurricane Helene are heartbreaking. And oftentimes the black and white text is accessible to only certain people. Oftentimes it's, in my experience, it's retired people who have the time to read articles either in the paper or on their phone. It's really important to me that in order to secure a livable future in the face of climate change, that these stories are accessible to young people, to working people, and to people with different attention spans or reading abilities or life patterns. And so this book came out of me sitting down with some friends and thinking about people have been fighting the MVP for, at that time, it was almost 8 years. What are the ways we haven't communicated the fight as effectively as we could have? And what came to mind was accessible illustration that could get younger people or school-age people or just busy people's attention.
There are so many people who are involved in that opposition, some of whom went by pseudonyms, some of whom were never publicly linked to that fight. How did you choose the activists who are featured in this book?
I actually did a series of comic strips that was featured on the Appalachians Against Pipelines Instagram page. And those comic strips were all anonymous. They were all critters from the wild. So like in one of the comic strips, the main character is a bear. And this comic strip, what happens in the comic strip is based off of someone's real story. But that person's story is kept anonymous in part because of that part of the fight that was a big part of how powerful the resistance was the direct action where a lot of people for their safety remained anonymous. So it's definitely a part of my work that I'm really interested in, is how do we safely uplift people's stories when there's so much surveillance from different entities that can really put them in danger. And we're seeing escalated charges against climate activists. So making sure to keep people as safe as possible. But for this book, I really wanted people to be able to connect with actual people, because I think that before you can connect with more anonymous versions of these stories, it's helpful to have people who look like your grandmother or look like your friend who is indigenous to this land and is a big part in cultivating the land and the future for it. So I really wanted people to connect to that. So the real ethos of this book is, what does it look like for ordinary people to stand up against a pipeline? And how can you, being the reader, take your skills that you already have to fight for a climate safe future or a livable future. So that's why I ended up going with real people. Also, what sort of identities were most prevalent in the fight? In the MVP fight and in a lot of pipeline fights, women and queer people are at the front lines. Of course, there are a few men throughout every pipeline fight, but readers will notice that this book is entirely women identifying people and one queer person. So that also was that decision was organically made for me. It wasn't an intentional decision.
So there's been a lot of attempts to diminish the pipeline fighters, diminish the movement, and I think probably even more so now that the pipeline has been completed, with air quotes about it, because there's still work going on, still maintenance work. So why is this work revisiting? Why does this movement still matter even now?
I think it's a strategy of our opposition to minimize the work of pipeline fighters and anti-fossil fuel advocates across the U.S. I think that anytime people who believe in climate change believe that narrative, they are believing a narrative that was propagated by the fossil fuel industry. Our natural narrative is to speak to the power of our community and of our stories and influencing people. That's what we've done since the beginning of time, is tell the stories of our elders and tell stories of hope. So I think that our natural inclination should be and is to tell these stories like this pipeline fight from a hopeful perspective. I mean, the pipeline wasn't able to be built for 10 years, and a lot of that was because of their own wrongdoings and their own recklessness, and because the people who first saw the pipeline be proposed knew that it was a disaster waiting to happen. I mean, right before the Mountain Valley Pipeline went into service, part of it exploded on Bent Mountain during water testing. And the communities around the pipeline, many of them said, we knew this would happen. We told you, Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, that this would happen, and you didn't listen to us. So I think that when we fall into narratives around, oh, the Mountain Valley Pipeline was built, so that means it's a loss, or the fossil fuel activists are up against too much, so they'll never win, we're just mimicking our oppressors. So I think instead what I would like to see, and what I would like Holler to contribute to, is a narrative around how amazing and powerful it is to see people stand up for the love of their community and the love of their planet in the face of the most resourced corporations and industry arguably in the world. The other aspect of this book that's important to me that people pick up on is the power of the Appalachian working class. I think it's very well known in Appalachia that people distort realities in Appalachia and create stereotypes that are sometimes true and they're often not. And one of those stereotypes, especially given election realities, is that people are to be blamed for the politicians that they elect. And I want people to read this book in the context of this place that many elite liberals and others cast aside, and realize that there is a deep history of people fighting for their land and their communities, from indigenous communities to mining communities to pipeline resistance communities, and that many of these people also happen to be working class. They happen to be juggling full-time jobs. They happen to be single-handedly raising kids. I want Holler to add a dynamism to some of these characters' lives so that people who grew up in the Northeast like I did are more open to the reality that the people in Appalachia are really on the front line of the climate crisis, and that if we leave certain communities behind in our elitism or our urgency, we will lose. We need to bring everyone along. We need to bring the working class along. We need to make sure indigenous communities are at the forefront of the movement. And also, like some of the characters in this book show, we need to think about like what direction our movement is being led towards and who's leading it. So for example, Crystal Mello in this book, she has a very diverse family. So some of her family members are Black. And so from that experience in the book, she tells the story of how she came to realize the realities of this country and how that shaped her resistance. So I'm hopeful that this book can contribute to that broader conversation about adding nuance to those kind of lazy stereotypes about this region.
That was Denali Sai Nalamalabu. Their book is Holler, a graphic memoir of rural resistance. It's available in May from Timber Press. It's been more than a decade since anyone built a large coal plant in the U.S., and a lot of remaining coal plants are scheduled for retirement. But utilities are starting to rethink some of those plans. The Allegheny Front's Carol Holsopple has more.
Many coal-fired power plants have closed or are scheduled to close over the next few years, mostly because of competition from cheaper natural gas and renewables. That's been a boon for air quality and climate emissions. But according to an analysis by Floodlight, a news outlet that investigates corporations and political interests stalling climate action, over 30 U.S. coal plants are looking to delay their retirement or are thinking about it. Emma Farringer Merchant wrote the story for Floodlight, and I asked her why the reversal.
Many coal plant operators say they are changing their plans because of rising energy demand. And utility planning processes run in cycles, so as energy demand changes, they may shift the plants they plan to keep online and those they plan to add in coming years. Many utilities in recent years have announced plans to retire coal plants and have started using more renewable energy to meet electricity demand. But now many are saying that they'll need to keep coal plants around longer to meet expected energy demand as that changes and rises significantly.
What are the projections for how much more energy will be needed over the next 5 or 10 years? For power, I understand like data centers and AI are increasing the demand.
Yes. Well, I would say that's still a bit of an open question, just how significantly demand is going to grow as we see how rapidly data centers and other big computing applications grow. There are also other big sectors demanding more energy, like manufacturing. And 5-year forecasts for how much electricity we will need has grown by about 5 times just in the last couple of years. So we're seeing changes happening quickly. And the Department of Energy has said that demand specifically for data centers could double or even triple by 2028.
How are consumers paying for the continued use of coal as part of the energy grid?
Some coal plants today are running when they are not the cheapest option. And this is what we call an economic dispatch. When utilities use more expensive coal plants before other generation sources that are cheaper, those costs are passed on to consumers. So you can think of it as like this stable of, or this group of generation plants that we have that we can draw from at any one time. And they're drawn from usually in economic order. So the cheapest will be turned on first, and the more expensive will be turned on as you need more energy to meet demand. And Rocky Mountain Institute, which is a clean energy consultancy that tracks uneconomic coal dispatch, estimates that operating coal plants at times when there are other cheaper options available cost consumers in the US between $1 and $2 billion per year.
How could the incoming Trump administration impact the continued use of coal for energy?
So the decline in coal use in the US has much more to do with economics than policy, but the Trump administration or previous Trump administration was definitely a proponent of fossil fuels, and the incoming Trump administration could target power plant rules created by the Biden administration that would put more controls on coal plants. Trump has said he wants to get rid of those rules. This could allow coal plants to stay open longer and allow them to take longer to retire if there are less restrictions on their operation.
That was Emma Faringer Merchant speaking with Kara Holzapfel. You can read Merchant's story at floodlightnews.org. Wildfires in Los Angeles County, California have killed dozens of people and destroyed more than 10,000 structures. Wildfires seem to be getting worse. Not just out west, but here in Appalachia too. Erica Smithwick is a professor and fire expert at Pennsylvania State University. Inside Appalachia producer Bill Lynch spoke with Smithwick about what causes wildfires and how people can prepare.
First and foremost, kind of tell me about you and the work you do.
Sure. I am an ecologist. I have studied wildfires over the course of my career, several decades, particularly in Yellowstone National Park and the subalpine Rocky Mountain regions, and now into the Mid-Atlantic region, where actually we're anticipating a changing fire regime region. So I'm a geographer. I think about systems. I think about how people and the environments are connected and how all of those systems are changing quite dramatically under climate change.
Obviously, the news has been full of it almost every day now, about the fires in California. But California is kind of prone to fires. What about other places like West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia?
Obviously, we are not used to seeing the extensive, severe, fast-moving fires in the eastern United States or the Mid-Atlantic like we would in the western United States, but they do occur. And particularly in the southern Appalachian region, we have wildfires. People may remember the Gatlinburg fire several years ago. It hit communities that had very few exit routes, and communities were severely impacted by that wildfires. And the reason is that in the eastern United States and many parts of the region, we are highly intermingled between the natural environments that are prone to fire and human infrastructure and lived environments. And so even smaller fires can have a very significant impact. In many parts of the Mid-Atlantic, we're now putting beneficial fire back on the landscape to restore habitats depend on fire, our pine and our oak systems. In some cases, preventing other species like maples coming in the understory and restoring habitat for wildlife. But in the absence of that kind of management strategy, it is possible that under severe droughts like we had in the eastern United States past year, that we could be in store for greater wildfire risk.
How do they actually spread?
Yeah, well, we might be familiar with what you need to start a campfire, right? You need an ignition source, you need some dry weather conditions to dry your wood, and you need the wood itself, you need the fuel. So those are really the ingredients to start a fire. And in natural systems, what that means is you either have a spark from lightning, but it also could come from human ignitions. And most of our severe wildfires these days have a human ignition source, particularly in the east where lightning may not be as prominent a factor. And so we could have downed electric lines, we can have campfires, or other incendiary objects, fireworks that can be sparks for fires. And so if you have that, and then you have dry fuels that perhaps have experienced long, extended periods of drought, and then you can add to that winds or severe events that can really add oxygen to the combustion process, you really do have the conditions for wildfire. And that can happen anywhere. Again, we think of the eastern or mid-Atlantic regions, Appalachian regions, as being wetter, and that's true on an annual basis, but we're also prone to extended droughts. The thing about climate change is that we're expecting the wets to become wetter and the dries to become drier. So this could mean that even it may not be all year round, but we could see periods where we have that more extensive wildfire risk.
You kind of jumped to the question I was going to ask. That's about how does climate change play into wildfires?
Yeah, well, we are seeing wildfires becoming larger. They're becoming more intense. They're moving faster. We have science about this. Even in California, 15 of the 20 more destructive wildfires that have occurred within the past decade. So we know that these fires are unnatural. I've studied wildfires for decades in many parts of the United States, and we used to think that these severe wildfires were something that some ecosystems were adapted to and were part of a normal functioning of the system. But the truth is that the fires that we're seeing now, they are not natural. They are not part of that normal fire cycle. Humans and climate change collectively have really pushed us to a system that is unprecedented. And this is affecting our communities, as we're seeing now in California.
Obviously, the folks in California, the places being hit, they weren't expecting this. What can some small towns in Appalachia, what can communities here do to prepare for wildfires?
It's a really good question because in some of the fire situations that we're seeing now in California, it's really too late to do much to prepare. I think communities in general have to be thinking very much more proactively about how they are thinking about living in a world with more fire. And that means that we have to come to terms with putting healthy fire back on the landscape, one where managers know how to control the burns, they know how to control the smoke, and allowing some of the fuel to be reduced through that fire management process. Again, that helps restore healthy ecosystems. And so communities need to be supportive of these kinds of forest management strategies in our natural ecosystems and support those managers with resources to take care of those landscapes where they can do so. But on the other hand, we have to recognize that wildfires are likely to come in some of these areas. So there's things that communities can do, like becoming part of an organization called Firewise Communities. And this provides resources to municipalities and counties to help prepare for wildfire, but also to do community education, working with local communities about how to create fire-safe structures, how to create safe landscaping around your home. And ultimately, what I'd like to see more and more is us thinking about zoning, us thinking about how we're planning our communities so that we are understanding that in the case of an emergency, we have exit routes, we have emergency preparedness. So there's things that municipalities and policies can do to kind of adapt and prepare for these future fire events.
Dr. Smithwick, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for calling.
That was Penn State professor Erica Smithwick speaking with Bill Lynch. Smithwick is also a member of Science Moms, a nonpartisan group that works to demystify climate change. Flooding is a frequent problem in Appalachia, and some floods can reshape communities, like the 2022 floods in eastern Kentucky, or the 2024 floods from Hurricane Helene. Well, almost 50 years ago, historic flooding struck a part of Appalachia about the size of Connecticut. Part of the area affected by that flood was the town of Grundy in southwestern Virginia. In a rare move, Congress authorized a major rebuilding project that physically moved the town. Radio IQ's Roxy Todd brings us this look at one of the most epic engineering efforts in American history.
A creek runs through the center of where Grundy's downtown district once stood. Decades ago, there were 2 movie theaters, shops, and restaurants. Today, there's a law school, and across from that, in a small white building, is a restaurant that sells cheeseburgers and fried chicken sandwiches. The owner, Zach Johnson, grew up in Grundy.
Every day I come to work here at Ratty Dax, my restaurant, and I'm just like, I try to take it in every day because it changes every day.
He means the seasons, the bright reds and oranges in fall, the snow-covered trees in winter.
Oh, there's this heron that lives in the creek right up front. Yeah, it's amazing.
But what's also changed in his lifetime is the town itself.
My senior yearbook, the theme of the yearbook was moving mountains. It led you to believe that there was going to be this utopia across the river, which turned into a 3-story Walmart.
To explain what happened to Grundy, you have to go back to 1977, when 6 feet of water flooded the historic downtown district. 3 years later, Congress authorized the Army Corps of Engineers to help communities in Virginia, Kentucky, and West Virginia rebuild. The Corps paid most of Grundy's building owners and tore down their structures, and they built a new commercial district across the river. But the mountainous terrain meant there wasn't anywhere above the floodplain to build. So the Army Corps decided to bulldoze a part of the mountain to create a 17-acre parcel of flat land. As part of the project, Virginia rerouted the road through Grundy and built a highway on higher ground, which was completed in 2023. Johnson says the road, while faster, uprooted even more of the town.
And it's wiped out one of my childhood favorite restaurants, Dotson's Drive-In, and just broke my heart, really. And I just thought, why don't we just move back here and open a restaurant? Because this place needs a restaurant.
Another Grundy business owner, Tass Robertson, says most of the criticism he's heard about the project is how long it's taken.
I was 2 years old whenever the flood hit, and I'm 49 now. And you would have expected that it would have moved a little bit quicker than that, but that's the way that things happen.
Part of why it's taken so long is because the Army Corps has to wait for Congress to appropriate each new phase of the project. The redeveloped site looks completely different from the old stone and brick buildings from before. Next to the 3-story Walmart is a medical office and a Mexican restaurant. Jean Van Dyke lives just outside of Grundy.
You know, I miss some of the older stores that was here, but it's changed for the better, so I can live with it.
Ask almost anyone in Grundy what this town is known for, and apart from the relocation of the downtown, they'll tell you it's wrestling. The high school team has won the state tournament 27 times. Robertson, who coaches a local wrestling club, says their winning streak began after the 77 flood.
And what a lot of those guys told me was they didn't have to go to school for 2 months. So they practiced and they got ready. And whenever it was time for the state tournament, it was on. The rest of those people didn't know what was coming.
Every February, when it's time for the wrestling team to compete in the tournament, people line up on the side of the road, cheering them on with signs.
I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. And mainly not because of the mountains, not because of the roads, not because of the buildings, because of the people.
Buchanan County and the Army Corps are continuing their flood mitigation work that began nearly 5 decades ago. The next phase of the project is to consolidate the high schools and build a new school on top of a former mountaintop removal site. In Grundy, I'm Roxy Todd.
After taking a break for the winter, some backyard gardeners are just now starting seeds on their windowsills. But folks who make their living from farming haven't really taken a break. A lot of hard physical work goes into growing crops and raising animals. And farming takes a mental toll as well. WMRA's Aisha Pirka has more.
Agriculture is the largest private industry in Virginia, with 97% of farms in the state owned by families. People in the agriculture profession face a variety of stressors impacting their mental health, which can include financial concerns and other factors such as weather that can influence every year's harvest. But farmers may not have access to health insurance or mental health specialists in their vicinity, and finding a specialist who is aware of issues related to agriculture is another matter. One of those issues is that farming rarely provides downtime. Jessica Hall is the co-owner of Harmony Harvest Farm, a flower farm in Augusta County that also ships products nationwide.
So I think a lot of farmers will tell you that there's not a schedule. It doesn't ever turn off.
Hall manages the farm with their mother and sister. The sisters also run a separate business on the grounds that produces sustainable floral design tools. Hall says she begins her day at around 4 a.m., but after her teammates disappear later in the day, she continues working on the farm.
So in the evenings, there's still work to be done on the farm. And after I welcome my kids home on the school bus, I'm back out into the greenhouses, covering crops and tightening things up and putting things away for a nice evening. But there's always work to be done on the farm.
Hall says that the work is uniquely isolating.
I think any business is going to tell you it's incredibly stressful and isolating. Mm-hmm. If you look at any spectrum of farming, a lot of times it's somebody out on a tractor by themselves, it's somebody weeding by themselves. There's a lot of solo time. And when you're alone like that, even if you work within a group, the endless and daunting tasks that there's no end to a list ever on a farm. There is always more to be done than can be accomplished.
And the specter of failure on a farm extends beyond just losing a business.
I live where I work. So if I get fired, lose my business, I lose my house. It's all very interwoven. And so it can feel a little harder to disconnect that and to not take that as part of your identity of success or failure. And it takes a lot of work to be able to compartmentalize that.
Hall says that they are a family business and that they work through challenges together, including mental health hurdles.
It's opening up that vulnerability in a really safe space to make sure that we're all the best us's at the end of the day. Like, all farmers can grow good crops, but all farmers really need to focus on growing good farmers.
Jeremy Dabbert is a dairy agent at the Rockingham County Extension Office. He says that stigma in agriculture can keep people from seeking out resources when they need them.
There still is the stigma that, if you seek mental health, it's a weakness, I guess, is how it's perceived. We're just trying to help bring awareness that if you break your arm, you're going to go to the hospital and get a cast put on it. Well, mental health, it's not a weakness, it's a sickness.
Dabbert says most farmers either don't have health insurance or have very limited insurance. But he says there are a lot of resources and practices available, including telehealth.
Some other things that we try and teach when I do some of my sessions is just some things that people can do to lower stress, exercising, eating healthy, meditation, prayer, deep breathing exercises, some things that really don't cost anything, that really don't take a lot of time. And that they can just be more intentional about, paying attention to their mental health to help themselves.
There are hotlines dedicated to serving farmers, such as the Agri-Stress Helpline and Farm Aid Hotline. But Hall believes that those resources are not highlighted enough.
It's one of those things of getting the resources where they really matter. Everybody's going to the co-op to buy their seed and fertilizer. There really should be some posters explaining. Every Tractor Supply bathroom should have a big poster about mental health and the hotlines that you can reach out to in case you need help.
Even though the stress factors are many, there is also hope for building connections and staying grounded. For WMRA News, I'm Aisha Pirke.
Till next time, thanks for joining us as we journey throughout Appalachia. Our theme music is by Matt Jackford. Other music this week was provided by Landau Eugene Murphy Jr., the Carpenter Ants, Aristotle Jones, Morgan Wade, the Dirty River Boys, and John Lessard. Bill Lynch is our producer. Abby Neff is our associate producer. Our executive producer is Eric Douglas. Kelly Libby is our editor. Our audio mixer is Patrick Stevens. We had help this week from Folkways editors Clara Hazlett and Nicole Musgrave. You can find us on Instagram @InAppalachia. You can also send us an email to insideappalachia@wvpublic.org. Visit wvpublic.org/InsideAppalachia to subscribe or stream all of our stories. Or look for Inside Appalachia on your favorite podcast app. Inside Appalachia is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.